Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Safety Committee. My name is Mark Conway, Chair of the committee and representative of the 4th District. We have in attendance here today Councilwoman McCray of the 2nd District, Councilman Blanchard of the 11th District,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Gray of the 8th District, Councilwoman Porter of the 10th District, and Councilman Parker of the 1st District. Today, the committee is having a hearing to discuss LO 25-0036, police accountability. For the purpose of the committee holding regular hearings with the police department, the Police Accountability Board, the Administrative Charging Committee, the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, and other related agencies, community groups, advocates, and other outside stakeholders to conduct oversight on the current police accountability system and identify options to strengthen police accountability and increase transparency regarding accountability procedures. I'll start off with a brief statement of my own. So many of us here today have worked to fill the bank of public trust in our police department. We know all too well that when trust is exhausted, when the bank runs empty, our beloved city is liable to erupt. Confidence in our police department is a precious quantity we cannot afford to squander. We draw on that trust every time there is a police-involved incident. We ask the citizens of the city to trust that we'll make every effort to ensure that our police are working in alignment with the expectations of the community. When officers fail to uphold that standard, we commit that they will be held accountable. This summer has tested that trust in ways that should give everyone here pause. Our communities are still wounded from the loss of Bilal Abdullah, a beloved Arabber shot dead in Upton. Portasha Brooks, a 70-year-old woman killed during a mental health crisis. Dante Melton Jr., restrained to death by officers during what should have been a welfare call. And of course, just last week, the conduct of the officer who chose to use his cruiser to nearly run a man over. Each of these have rightfully enraged the people of the city. Citizen oversight is the cornerstone of Baltimore's police reforms. The degree to which residents can see, speak into, and shape the mechanisms that govern police conduct is a very measure of our progress and the greatest guarantee of accountability we can offer. Most importantly, when tragedy strikes or officers fall short of the standard the people have a right to expect, the people of Baltimore must have a voice powerful enough to demand answers and shape what comes next. Today, these reforms are under threat. In a time when a lawless president has subordinated the Department of Justice into his personal rule, we can no longer rely on the federal government to enforce accountability through the consent decree. In its absence, our own local architecture for accountability becomes all the more important. Yet here at home, the architecture we've developed to ensure citizen oversight faces its own crisis of purpose. Administered by an executive that may have a conflict of interest, smothered by a bureaucracy that confuses oversight with opposition, and stripped of the independence it needs to execute its critical mandate. When the council created the Police Accountability Board, the vision was clear: to ensure that when tragedies like those we've seen recently happen, there would be a trusted, independent, civilian mechanism to demand answers, identify patterns, and help prevent the next unnecessary death. The PAB was meant to close a gap between the public and the police. 2 years into existence, however, the board has still been fighting to do what it was created to do. Because the board, as it stands today, is structurally dependent on the very administration it's supposed to oversee. It is severely constrained without a good partner in the City Hall. My office has received reports of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, OECR, which administratively houses the PAB. It often treats it like a subordinate rather than an independent body. Its staff has withheld access to communications, delayed casework, and refused to share community complaint data. I've been told that the board's own data specialist resigned due to frustration with OECR's obstruction. The board cannot even retain independent legal counsel without permission from the city solicitor, who simultaneously represents the police department and the oversight body is meant to review it. In practice, the PAB is a watchdog whose leash technically remains in the hands of the mayor. The board's ability to conduct oversight has also been crippled by the city's failure to produce a unified data set that links complaints, investigations, and discipline. Despite repeated requests from both this council and the board, there are still no shared systems connecting the BPD's internal affairs records, the administrative charging committee's decisions, and the PAB's complaint intake data. Cases move through different agencies without a traceable thread, and there's no mechanism to verify whether discipline recommended by the ACC is ever carried out by the department. Furthermore, the Mayor's Office of Government Relations continues to filter data before it reaches the City Council, dumping data that is incomplete or delivered last minute. Even as we arrived here today, MOGR shared their compilation of data rather than the entire data set hours before this meeting. All in all, it begs the question, why should the mayor's office be gatekeeper for information meant for this oversight body? During our last hearing on July 15th, the committee members made several requests intended to increase the availability of data detailing the outcomes for our accountability processes and to spur the development of a data infrastructure capable of delivering clear, consistent, and regularly updated data that will enable us to identify and assess trends over time. I note that following that hearing, we did receive some new data detailing the disciplinary measures recommended by the ACC, and we thank the administration for these data. And according to these data, in 2025, year to date at that time, the ACC had made administrative recommendations for discipline in 748 cases. Again, that was just a point in time. Now, these data documents, these data document steps in an administrative process managed by the ACC, but they didn't give us the final outcomes of these administrative processes. For example, we didn't know how many of the recommended disciplinary measures have been the subject of trial board proceedings or even court cases, and thus we don't know what the actual outcomes of these discipline recommendations are. To be clear, we don't know the running total number of officers that have been disciplined. Notably, no data regarding the number of officers electing to appeal recommended discipline through the trial board process or the decisions of those trial boards was provided to the council in the written answers we received from OECR, BPD, or MOGR. Apparently, however, at least some data on trial board processes exists. The Baltimore Sun reported on discussion that occurred during last week's consent decree review hearing regarding a backlog of 488 police accountability cases waiting to be heard by trial boards. The Sun also reported that between 2 and 4 trial boards are being convened each month. If 4 trial boards were convened each month going forward, it would take approximately a decade to clear this backlog. And you know what? This discussion illustrates precisely why we need outcome data regarding the police accountability process. A process that can take a decade to render a decision is not really a process that's upholding accountability. Without real independence, the PAB cannot restore public trust. Without transparency, the council cannot know whether reform is working. And without reform, the promise of a citizen oversight risks becoming another chapter in Baltimore's long history of deferred accountability. These are only some of the challenges facing our system of oversight. Over the course of this hearing, we will hear more from the PAB, from the police department, and from the public about the obstacles to coordination that they've been facing. My hope is that the well-meaning bodies represented here today, from this council, from the police department to the Police Accountability Board itself, can all work together to address them before Baltimore once again becomes a tinderbox of frustration and mistrust. I believe every institution represented here wants to do right by the city. I really do believe that. The question is whether we can act fast enough to build trust before the people of Baltimore's anger once again finds nowhere else to go but to the streets. With that, we have a couple of folks here Jesmyn Riggins, who is both on the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee. Appreciate you being here, Jesmyn. And we've got representation from the police department. We've got the deputy commissioner here. We've got the director of OECR and a number of other folks. I'm gonna ask maybe you guys introduce yourselves, and then I'm gonna hand off then to Jesmyn so we can hear a little bit from you. So first, if we can do brief introductions from everybody here, and then Jesmyn, I'll hand off to you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amber Green. I am the Director of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. It's good to see you all. I'm also the city's Chief Equity Officer. I do want to make sure that we get a point to clarify some of the things that the council members shared, because some of those things were actually incorrect. We did provide a memo to the council in August. We have said
We're gonna call the meeting back into order. Thank you. Director, we're gonna get back to you because I do want you to have an opportunity to address the things that I've said. For now, I just want everyone to introduce themselves, and then we'll have Jesmyn give his testimony, and then we'll have an opportunity for both you and BPD to present in explicit detail on everything I've even said and what you guys came to talk about here today. So appreciate you.
Sure. How about, okay, now I really hear my voice. Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Amber Green, Director of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. I'm also the city's Chief Equity Officer. Glad to be here with my team. We definitely do want an opportunity to share some of the work that OECR is working on to enforce accountability. That is the utmost standard of what we do, but some of the things that were shared were factually incorrect. So I do want to make sure that we have an opportunity to share that at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Christopher Burnett, Equity Division Chief.
Jesmyn Riggins, a member of both the Police Accountability Board and Administrative Charging Committee.
Kaylin Young, Deputy Director.
Carissa Mattern, Policy Analyst and Interim Data Analyst for OECR.
Lisa Kelly, Interim PAD Chief.
Shamaya Kearney, Deputy City Administrator.
Thank you.
Brian Nadeau, Deputy Police Commissioner.
Olufemi Akani, Chief of the Public Integrity Division.
Erin Murphy, Chief of Staff and Government Relations for BPD.
Nina Themelis, Director of Government Relations for the Mayor's Office.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. I want to acknowledge Councilwoman Ramos of the 14th District who's joined the meeting, and Councilman Glover of the 13th District who have joined the meeting. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Riggins.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Blanchard, and members of the Public Safety Committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this afternoon. My name is Jesmyn Riggins. For the last decade, I've worked in police oversight in Baltimore City, first as the Civilian Review Board Supervisor of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, where I rebuilt operations, oversaw investigations, supervised staff, and advised board members. Then as Chief of Staff to Senator Jill P. Carter, where I focused on police oversight legislation, and now as a member of both the Police Accountability Board and Administrative Charging Committee, where I've served as a policy chair and reviewed approximately 2,500 internal investigation cases. Today I will focus my oral testimony on two pillars that I think will help make police oversight in Baltimore more credible and effective, which is legal independence from the law department to the extent possible, and operational independence from the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. I will refer this committee and members of the public to my written testimony for a brief inside history of why independence matters. I chronicle my experience at the Office of Equity and Civil Rights and provide a warning that if this history is either ignored or forgotten, we are bound to repeat it and what happened to the Civilian Review Board in that it was structurally undermined and eventually labeled a toothless tiger will happen to the PAB and ACC. For Baltimore's police oversight system to work, it must not only be empowered, but it must also be allowed to exercise the powers it is given by law. For example, the law currently provides that the ACC has the power to require a police department to further investigate a complaint if it determines that the investigation was inadequate. The law also allows the ACC to issue subpoenas if there is outstanding evidence it deems necessary to make a decision. However, if counsel representing the ACC, which also represents the police department, reads the law in a way that disallows it from exercising these powers against the department, then regardless of legislative intent, they do not exist. Yet these powers may exist on paper, but in practice, they are in name only. Further, if the current oversight system is to properly function, it must be insulated from shifts in political winds, dependent on the continuity of goodwill from administration to administration. Because the mayor appoints the city solicitor and the director of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, who also doubles as the director of the Police Accountability Board, both legal and operational support of the board and ACC can change in an instant. One year, the PAB and ACC may have the necessary operational support needed to perform their duties efficiently and effectively. In the next, they can be placed on life support based on a change in administration or in administration's attitude, or change in administration's attitude towards civilian oversight. I've seen this happen with my own two eyes, which is why I encourage this committee to continue holding these hearings and listening to those who have been doing this work for years, so that discussions around how to strengthen police oversight are holistic and generative of impactful reforms. Again, I will refer this committee and members of the public to my written testimony for more context. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Riggins. And we're going to get through all the presentations first before we get to a round of questions. Turn it over to agencies. I understand you guys are going to be doing a joint presentation. Awesome.
Chair, if I could, I think it's very important to be able to some of the factually incorrect statements that were made as a part before we even get into the presentation. And I would appreciate if you would just allow a couple of moments to address that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Can start. So first, thank you to Jasmine for Chair for being here. I will just reiterate, I believe that the Office of Equity and Civil Rights has a very good working relationship with both the ACC and the PAB. If there's something that they ask for, we provide it. So I do think that there is not a relationship that you characterize as subordinate to one another. We do work in partnership. We do work to make sure that they have all the resources that they need. I've asked our ACC members, and I believe specifically Jasmine himself, is just anything that you specifically need that we're not providing. I have not received anything, but I stand ready to accept if there's something that you need, you let me know and we will provide that to you all. But to go into some of the questions that were shared, or rather the statements that were shared, the Office of Equity and Civil Rights did provide a memo to this council, to your office. We also held subsequent meetings with your staff. We did invite you to those meetings. Unfortunately, that did not work for your schedule, but we stand ready to be able to walk you through some of the questions that you may have so that you can be very familiar with what is happening, how cases are decided, where there are specific instances in terms of where we may have disagreement with the police department, and to understand that those did not happen. So that's unfortunate to have this hearing today where we weren't able to meet with you all to really discuss that in detail so we could be able to answer any questions that you may have. With respect to the legal counsel provided to the ACC with subpoena power, the ACC has not used its subpoena power. The law department has reviewed the ACC, their rights to do so. The law department also provided, and I believe you all have that in your memo as well, specific responsibilities in terms of the city solicitor being responsible for representing those instances. So all of that information has been provided to the council. Those dates were August 8th and also September 15th as well. Thank you.
So, Director, I appreciate you, and I did acknowledge that you guys shared this. This is the response you guys gave us, and it answered some of the questions, but some of the big questions that we have here, and I outlined in my statement, we were missing outcomes, and I think that's a core consideration that I think It's great for us to know how many complaints come through the door. It's helpful, but if we don't know that people are held accountable and that it changes behavior or that people receive some form of punishment if necessary, or resolution, period, whether there will be punishment or not, I think it's really, really important. And I think the trial board and the outcomes from the trial board remain a gap, and I think over time remain a gap. We know that things went to the trial board. I don't know the outcomes from all the trial board decisions. And so the point here, yes, you guys did provide this, but this didn't give us everything we needed. And I think that's why we got the slideshow for today's meeting an hour and a half before the meeting. And I know there's a whole lot that needs to happen before it gets to the committee, but I think that's part of the process too. We should very easily be able to tell how many complaints come in, how many decisions are made from those complaints, the type of complaints that come in, and we'll get into the slides here. I don't want to steal your thunder, but the detail that I think we want to be able to have in order to make conscious decisions about training or punishment or recommendations from the Police Accountability Board, you can't do that if you just have high-level data. And so I think that's what we're still missing.
So that's what we'll go through today, is share some of those specific things with the police department. You're right that it should have been given to you a little bit earlier. That's what happens when you're doing a joint presentation with agencies. There are things we want to make sure are accurate and factually correct, which they have been. So with that, I guess Deputy Commissioner and I can share our slides, if that's okay.
Yes.
Just before we start, I just want to mention, so we are under a federal consent decree. Nothing has changed in our federal consent decree from this year to last year to 5 years ago. It is the same federal consent decree. It is still DOJ. It has not been wavered, changed upon. We still meet with the judge once a month. We still have a quarterly hearing, public quarterly hearing. Anyone is welcome to come. We had our last one on Thursday. We present numbers to the quarterly hearing. We present numbers monthly to the judge. We present all of this to the judge and the court. I just want to put on the record, nothing has changed in that process. We are still under consent decree, and we still abide by the consent decree.
All right, so we will present our joint slide deck. I don't know if DC, can you come up this way so I can see you?
Who is the clicker? Oh, it's up here.
Up there. Thank you. All right. So I will kick things off firstly. Thank you.
So this slide actually shows
I
you
just want to know we have a timer of 15 minutes for you
I see
guys.
that, sir.
So
It's clicking as we're talking.
all right.
This slide shows you sort of the accountability process that we use. Of course, we have the police department doing our investigations as a public integrity division. Once those investigations are done, they either go to the disciplinary review committee if they are cases that the misconduct did not involve a member of the public. If it did involve a member of the public, it goes over to the administrative charging committee, and I'll turn it over to Director Green to go over that side.
Thank you. So in terms of our specific entities, there are two that we'll be referencing today. The Police Accountability Board, which is a civilian-led board that receives complaints, appoints some members of the Administrative Charging Committee and trial board members, and makes specifically policy recommendations. The ACC reviews misconduct investigations, examines body-worn camera footage, determines administrative charges, and recommends disciplinary action when applicable. The ACC, if you think of it, is similar to like a grand jury when they determine whether there is enough evidence to charge the officer. The ACC is made up of 5 civilian members, 1 PAB chair or their designee, 2 are appointed by the PAB, and 2 are appointed by the mayor with 3 years, with 3 years with a 2-year limit on terms. The ACC convenes weekly, issues written decisions, maintains confidentiality, and follows a statewide disciplinary matrix for police discipline. After the ACC reaches a decision, OECR staff prepare determination letters documenting the findings and any of those charges. These letters are then sent to the law enforcement agency, the involved officer, and the complainant. I'll turn it back to BPD.
If the case does not involve the ACC, which means the misconduct did not involve a member of the public, the discipline process goes to the Disciplinary Review Committee. That is composed of members selected by the police commissioner, both sworn and not sworn. They make the determination of what the violation is pursuant to the statewide matrix, which is the same matrix that the ACC uses. And they only have responsibility for cases which do not involve, when the misconduct does not involve a member of the public. There are two terms that often come up during these hearings and in our work. One of them is complaint. A complaint is any person may provide information regarding potential misconduct by a member of a BPD. The misconduct may involve one or more members and may involve one or more allegations. Those are complaints. That is what BPD sends to the ACC. Within those complaints, there are allegations. It's any assertion of wrongdoing against any member of BPD, whether by a member of the public or a member of the BPD. The assertion of wrongdoing would violate a policy, and that may be one or more allegations per complaint. So sometimes we see numbers seem rather high. It's because we have, for instance, 500 complaints. That may be 1,500 allegations. There's always going to be at least one allegation per complaint. Sometimes there's more than one, and there's always one member per complaint. Sometimes there's more than one. Now we're going to go over the overview of the disciplinary process. What we've given here, and we've given everyone a copy of this, is the disciplinary process that BPD uses. This has been filed with the court. This is under the new Maryland Police Accountability Act. As you can see at the top in the blue section, regardless of how we get the complaint, whether or not it comes through the PAB, or it comes through BPD itself through many ways, it goes to what we call the PID classification. That's when they look at the complaint, determine what the allegations might be, determine if it's an ACC complaint, or if it's a DRC complaint. Again, is the misconduct involve a member of the public? It then goes down to investigations. Once it finishes investigation, it goes to a supervisor and legal for review. Once that goes back and forth, if there's additional things that need to be done, it eventually goes to a PID commander who reviews it. And then it comes down and makes at this point, the determination of whether or not it was an ACC case or DRC changes the flow. For this, right now, I'm going to speak to you about a DRC, which means it did not involve the public. It then goes over and goes to the DRC. The Disciplinary Review Committee reviews it if it is a sustained case. Once that happened, the member chooses either to accept the discipline, which is by the statewide matrix, or they ask for a trial board. If they accept it, it is given to them and it's closed. If it is asked for a trial board, it is then set for a trial board. The trial board finds them guilty or not guilty, then issues the penalty. And once that is completed, they have the right to appeal to the circuit court. If they want to, we have had none appeal to the circuit court at this point, and at that point, the case is closed. BPD, under the consent decree, does find 4 findings on each investigation. The finding is either sustained, which means that the conduct occurred and that there was a violation of BPD policy. A not sustained means that the BPD could not determine whether or not there was a misconduct occurred. Unfounded is the conduct did not occur and was not the act of the respondent. Or exonerated means that the conduct did occur, but it was not a violation of BPD conduct. And underneath, it tells you how those are given. One is preponderance of the evidence, the one is clear and convincing evidence.
So I'll take over for the part where the OECR comes into play. But before I join in and see that, I just want to remind us of one thing when we're looking at this data and when we're looking at these numbers. These are people that are impacted. That's the heart of the work that all of our agencies are committed to doing, that the city is committed to doing. Our community members, including those within BPD, have put their trust in the accountability process, and maintaining that trust requires that we never lose sight of the fact that these numbers represent lives, safety, and human dignity, and that's a responsibility that none of us take for granted. So in terms of OECR's role in the complaint process, the complaint may come to us either in person, online, phone, or BPD precinct. So anybody can file a complaint. We have 3 days to forward that over to the law enforcement department. After the LEA completes their investigation, it is then sent to ACC review. One key point is that as of 10/1/2025, law enforcement agencies have 334 days to complete their investigation. Once their investigation is complete, that case file goes over back to us at OECR. So that's when we start our process, essentially. We take the complaint, The investigation is handled by the law enforcement agency, and once the completed case file is done, that gets to us, and we prepare the case file specifically for the ACC. So we review the case file to make sure that there's everything that needs to be in there. We'll go back to BPD and say, okay, hey, this is missing, or do we need more information here? Or if the ACC has a request on something, we'll ask on their behalf. But we get all that information and then prepare those cases. Then the ACC, from that standpoint, so we have a 30-day time clock that works from there. As soon as we get the case, we have 30 days to prepare it and get it to the ACC to be heard. Once the ACC hears the case, they make their charging determination and decision, and then that is the end of OECR's process with there. All of that information then transfers back over to the law enforcement agency, where they are responsible for either the officer will accept the discipline, or they can elect to go to a trial board, and that's where BPD will take over in that instance. So we're gonna walk through a quick case example, just so everybody's clear on like how this would work. So say July 1st comes around, someone makes a complaint. All of us here know July 1st, 2024 would be what fiscal year? 25, thank you, fiscal year 25. So I want us to keep that in mind because again, we're working off of different processes when it comes to how we collect the data. So that's just a key sticking point that we talked about the last hearing. July 1st, the complaint comes into us. Someone complains of discourteous behavior. We take that complaint, we then share it with the police department. We have 3 days to do so. We get that over to BPD in this instance. BPD then will take the time that it needs to complete that investigation. Depending on the complexity of the investigation will determine the time frame that it takes. In this hypothetical answer, this will take, let's say we have 9-month time frame. But again, this is hypothetical. Could be shorter, could be longer, depends on complexity of the case. Once they are finished, we get that case. So say we're now April 17th, 2025. We are in what calendar year? 25, and we're still in fiscal year 25, but the complaint happened in 2024 as a calendar year. So just keeping that in mind. Next thing there, the ACC, the OECR will then take that information, prepare the case, go back to BPD if there's something missing, or make sure that the ACC is ready to hear those cases, and say, let's say by May 9th, the ACC will hear that specific case. They hear the case, they do an excellent job of making sure that they are very thorough, of reviewing, asking questions, going back and requesting information. But generally, each case that they hear that day is resolved that day, meaning that their decision is being made. Then we will prepare those charging documents. OECR will send the letters of determination out to the specific complainant, the BPD as well, and then get that over to BPD to implement. Then the next step is BPD to implement that process. How the complaint is, actually, if you could go back to the previous slide. So how the complaint is, there we go, that last slide that says, how is a complaint counted? So for BPD, they are specifically required to provide their data by calendar year. For OECR, we are required to provide our data for the Police Accountability Board report by fiscal year. We do both though, because we realize that it can be confusing. So we provide fiscal year because we're required to do so, but we also provide calendar year when we provide information for public consumption. Cool? Thumbs up? Questions? Okay, great. Now we're gonna move on to understanding data across agencies. So in terms of data tracking, and I just alluded to this, we track by fiscal year and calendar year. OECR is responsible for not just BPD, but 5 other agencies: Police Department, Baltimore City Community College, Baltimore Sheriff's Office, City Public Schools, Environmental Police, and Johns Hopkins. We are only responsible for reviewing complaints that involve a member of the public and law enforcement only. Anything else besides that is going to be the police department. And our measurement variable, which is something that we specifically are required to do, is make sure that when the ACC hears the case, because again, that's our time frame. We have that 30 days to make sure that we are making sure that ACC has all that information. So those are the specific things that I wanted to make sure that we point out, because the case numbers will always vary between agencies because we're tracking different things. But what we try to do in the next couple slides is show where there's some overlap. But before I do that, I'm gonna give BPD an opportunity to share their specific data tracking.
And of course, we do ours by calendar year. That way we can do year to year. That's what we've always done in the agency. We do only BPD cases. We don't do other agency cases. We do all misconduct investigations involving any member, whether or not it has to do with the ACC or not ACC. We do all of them. And our date that we use is always the date that the complaint was filed. Here's some numbers of BPD that we share all the time with the court and the public. So the number of complaints that were received by BPD involving a member of the public, which means it's an ACC eligible. That is for 2025 year-to-date is 959. The number of BPD officers with complaints involving a member of the public, again, those are ACC eligible complaints, is 675. And the number of BPD officers with 2 or more complaints involving a member of the public is 286. For the investigation portion, number of cases investigated and completed by BPD involving a member of the public, again, it's ACC eligible case, is 824 so far this year. Number of misconduct complaints involving a member of the public in a law enforcement that the ACC heard, those are cases they heard for us, is 974. And then the number of members who accepted so far the discipline, again, out of the 974, some of those are not sustained, they're exonerated or unfounded. But for the sustained cases, number of members who accepted the ACC recommendation so far this year is 320, and the numbers who have elected to have a trial board is 321. Some other interesting facts that we have out here. These ones are internal complaints received. These are complaints of misconduct against a BPD member by a BPD person. These are throughout the year 2022, 23, 24, and year-to-date 25. You can see there's 543. External complaints received. These are complaints that are received outside of the department. For the year, as you can see so far, it's 763, and then the total this year so far is 1306. And then internal section, these are complaints that have been completed for the agency. So far, internal complaints, we've completed 512. External complaints, we just hit 700. For a total number completed is 1,212 so far this year.
So I'm going to go back to the types of allegations that we're hearing. So the deputy commissioner named that we heard 974 cases that the ACC heard this calendar year. So that chart right here illustrates the types of misconduct that the ACC has heard. And so these are the things that identifies the top categories of alleged officer misconduct for the year 2025. And so I hope this gives I hope that this gives the council some insight into the common areas for concern. So for example, we see here that 25% of the allegations that the ACC has heard are related to body-worn cameras. Then it goes by neglect of duty, conduct unbecoming of an officer, force out of policy, and harassment. That category that says 30% is a combination of about 42 different types of allegations that are 3% or less. So we didn't want to skew the graph too much, but you can see that the top allegations that the ACC is hearing are there. And why this is important is because it underscores which allegations are most common in helping us to understand officer behavior, where there may be areas for additional training, policy changes, or more oversight specifically needed in that space. As I mentioned before, the ACC does a tremendous amount of work. Like they really do every week. Board Member Riggins is there with others working very hard to review these cases in a timely manner so that they can meet that 30-day deadline. And for FY 2025, the ACC heard an average of about 23 cases per week. I got one more slide and then we're done. For the ACC, the total cases heard in fiscal year 2025, this provides some information on the types of outcomes that you all were asking about, and specifically for us. So we heard 1,190 cases for the ACC. This total includes cases specifically from the police department. Of those, 758 cases, which is about 2/3, resulted in the ACC deciding to administratively charge the officer. In these instances, it means that the ACC found that the conduct of the officer was in violation of law or departmental policy, warranting formal charges and recommended discipline. For cases that were not charged, that means that the case was investigated, but the ACC reviewed the case and it did not result in an administrative charge. In these cases, the committee determined either that no violation occurred or that there was insufficient evidence to charge the officer with misconduct. And these outcomes indicate instances where the officer's actions were found to be proper or the allegations could not be substantiated. And then there are 11 cases that were not adjudicated by the ACC. And this means that they did not render a charging decision on those cases due to external circumstances that prevented a hearing or decision. So for example, this number includes 3 cases that could not be heard because they conflicted with the ACC policy changes effective January 1st, 2025. Such cases are exceptional where the normal process could not be completed. 7 of those 11 cases were not adjudicated by the ACC because the officer no longer met the legal definition of a sworn officer, making them outside of the ACC's jurisdiction. So by the time the case reached the OECR and ACC, the officer had either resigned, retired, or was terminated.
So, and just in closing, I would say that we work really well together on the process. We've worked this process out over the last couple of years. It works well. We don't collaborate together on the findings. That is strictly the ACC's determination what the finding is. They send it back over to us. We are required by law to either give the penalty they give or a higher penalty. We could not give a lower penalty. That is not allowed by law. Every member has the opportunity to go to a trial board if they want to, and then they have to take what the trial board says, and then they can appeal to a court if they want to. We've had none appealed so far. But we have meetings once a week to discuss the process, to make sure things are flowing. We have a very good process of working together. But I did want to say that the findings of a case is their findings only. That is not BPD finding. The only ones that we find for are the ones that are DRC, which is not a member of involving a member of the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think helpful to see the whole process, understand where you guys hand off and who's responsible for what. We're going to open up for questions from the committee. And what I'll do here is we're going to start first with committee members, and then we have some guests that are joining us today, and we'll allow them to ask questions after the committee members have had their opportunity. I've got a few questions myself. For the slides that you presented today, I think they were really helpful. I think what we'd like to see is the bottom line and like the big number, the outcomes here. So according to the data from the ACC for year to date, the ACC has administratively charged 758 cases, right? Are you able to tell us how many separate officers have been subject to charges from the ACC?
So those would be in BPD slides, which illustrate the number of officers that had complaints against them.
Okay.
It's the chart that has the table. So there should be a column that says the number of officers with complaints.
So each complaint is tied to an officer? Each complaint is tied to an officer? If you can turn your mic. Yep.
And see, I couldn't hear you. Yeah, I don't have my own mic on. Each complaint is tied to at least one officer, may be tied to more than one officer. Each complaint has at least one allegation, may have more than one allegation.
All right, so then I think it's still difficult for us to identify that number. How many officers have been subject to administrative charges?
That is in the slide. That number is...
Yep. So BPD Police Accountability Summary 2025 year to date. But if a complaint can be one officer or multiple officers, that still leaves us at a loss for how many officers have been
286.
286.
That's
Got
with two
it.
or more complaints.
Okay. How many officers have been subject to multiple discipline recommendations through the ACC?
So I can tell you from the data we pulled, at least 286 have at least two or more complaints. If your question is...
So 286 have
It's
two or more.
286.
May I interject for a moment? So that slide that says BPD Police Accountability Year to Date, there are two numbers at the bottom where it says outcomes data. So it says number of members who accepted ACC discipline and numbers who elected trial boards. So that 320 number is the number of specific officers who accepted that discipline. 211 decided to opt for a trial board, and any of the other ones were the ones that were unfounded, excuse me. Yeah, not founded, the ones that were not adjudicated. So that's why there's a number between the two. So cases that were administratively charged and then those that weren't, that difference, that delta there for the difference is why that number is there.
So if the 286 is the number of officers that have received 2 or more complaints,
It's the top box, third one down.
all right, so let me make sure I'm understanding this data correctly. So for the complaint data on that top box, the number of complaints is 959. The number of officers is 675. And the number of officers with 2 or more complaints is 286.
Correct.
The number of members or officers who've accepted discipline or elected a trial board, that would be the total number of officers that have moved forward after an ACC recommendation.
So 320 have accepted.
So 531 would be the number of officers that have received some sort of punishment from the ACC.
Correct. Now, there are still some in motion that are coming over to us, have to go out. So there's another flux of a number that are moving through the process right now. But at the end of the day, I can tell you of the 974 cases that they heard, some of those, of course, are not sustained. Some of those are not sustained, not exonerated. I would say average is like 50% are sustained. So it's like an average. However, the number that we have in the system right now, and of course we have some coming through, is 531 that have either elected to accept or have asked for a trial board.
Okay. As far as the total force of sworn officers, we have about 2,050. Is that
2,051.
And so can you tell us how many individual BPD officers have had individual disciplinary actions recommended against them by either the ACC or BPD's own internal disciplinary process? So in other words, how many of the 2,051, you said, have been disciplined or have a case pending against them for misconduct?
Are you talking about 2025 or any time in history?
That's a great question. I would say I would probably want to know both. So we would, for simplicity's sake, let's just say for folks in 2025, we should be able to look back and see how many people still have outstanding cases from other years. But let's say for simplicity's sake, 2025.
So for 2025, we pulled the well, they took it down, but we pulled the ACC ones for 2025 because this hearing was on this process. Okay. We'd have to go back and pull the numbers for DRC and ACC because we don't have those. We don't track them that way. We have a different system that does problem. If we're looking for a problem person, we have a different system for that. So we'd have to go pull the numbers for ACC and DRC, 2 or more complaints. Because this hearing was on the ACC and us, so that's what we pulled.
So what you're saying is we know the number roughly to some degree of certainty for officers that have gone to the ACC and complaints, the total number of officers that have gone through the ACC. We don't track it that way, is what you're suggesting for internal complaints?
So we don't track individual officers across the board that have 2 or more complaints in this system. So it's a pull. We'd have to pull the record on that. We did pull the record for
not 2 or more, just any complaints.
For any complaint?
Yeah.
Well, no, for individual officers, no, because you could have 5 officers and 1 complaint. It's not like a easy flip a page and there it is. It's a report we'd have to pull by individual officers. So that report we'd have to pull. Again, we pulled numbers for the ACC because the hearing was on the ACC.
Okay. So now we've gone to the ACC. The ACC's made a recommendation. The officer has decided that he wants a trial board. He or she wants a trial board. Can you tell us how many officers are awaiting a trial board decision? And of those who are awaiting trial board decisions, how many are still on the street today?
So we have 488 trial boards pending.
Okay.
Across the board, not just 2025, but across the board. And of those officers, ready those termination, maybe 5. Yeah, possibly, I'm guessing off the top of my head, like 5 of those are termination, therefore they would not have police powers. But if anybody, if you don't have a termination pending, then you would still have police powers. So, and of the 488, I can't tell you those are all individual people. They may be one officer may have 2 or 3 cases pending in trial board. So it's certainly not 488 members. But off the top of my head, I don't know the number of members. I do know we're pending 488 trial boards.
So it's likely less than 483. Somewhere less than 80, because some of those could be officers with multiple.
Yeah, my guess is there's a few people with more than one pending over there. Because again, we have not had trial boards for MPAA, which is the law that changed in July of 2022. This is the first year we've been able to have the trial boards because of the process that was set up by the legislation, which took us a process to get into. And so that just started this year. And so we've only had 11 trial boards under the new statute because of the complexity of the statute.
Do we ever have instances, or do we have a sense for how many officers were awaiting a trial board hearing, but then incur another complaint that goes through the ACC and then to?
No, I don't know that. Again, most of these complaints, as you saw in Director Green's slide, most of these complaints are minor violations. Their body-worn camera, they didn't turn it on before their foot hit the ground. On their report writing, it was not done by the end of the shift. It was done the next day. Most of the cases are minor misconduct cases.
So I'll note that you seem to emphasize that there are a lot of complaints that involve officers' failure to turn on their body-worn cameras, as if this is like not that big a deal. In the recent Baltimore Sun article regarding the update hearing on the consent decree, it discusses how BPD has apparently downloaded the body-worn camera footage from the officer who tried to run over the man. And the article states, Deputy Police Commissioner Brian Nadeau said at the hearing that the department had opened an internal affairs case within 14 hours, suspended the officer's police powers, and downloaded videos from his body-worn camera. Now imagine that officer had not turned on his camera or turned it on in the middle of the incident, and there was no independent footage of the incident. It seems like there could be a very different perception of this matter, what led them to kind of carry out those actions. So would you agree that a failure to activate body-worn camera could have serious consequences and could impede the course of justice, the ability for us to hold said officer accountable?
So I would say we have very few. I could probably count on one hand the number of cases where somebody doesn't turn on their body-worn camera. 99.9% of these body-worn camera violations you're seeing are what we call late activation. As they arrived on a scene, they're supposed to have it turned on before they get out of the car. They're getting out of the car, it gets turned on. Is a technical violation for which the ACC charges. I can't even think of a case where we had somebody not turn it on, to be honest with you. We've had body-worn cameras since 2015. It's become second nature to the officers. They turn them on. Do some of them, pull up to a scene very quickly, jump out to help somebody and turn it on as they're getting out and they get charged by the ACC? That is true. Do they ask for a trial board? Of course they do, because they were going to help people and they were jumping out of the car, and that will be their defense. We don't have a huge problem with the body-worn camera. 99.999% of people use it as they're supposed to, but there are these delayed ones, what I would call minor delays, which we've not seen one yet that we've missed anything. But the policy was written to say that you had to turn it on before you got out of the car, and if you open up the door, the ACC has determined if you open up the door, you're getting out of the car. So that's where we are with those cases. I would agree with you if somebody didn't turn it on to surreptitiously do something wrong is a problem. I've not seen that in the 6 years I've been here.
Good. That's good to hear. Thank
And
you.
to be clear, there was no implication by BPD that failing to turn it on is like a minor infraction. What the DC was saying was just what we explained. And we do audit that. So to be clear, a lot of times these are found because BPD is auditing it.
Yeah, we have our own body-worn camera audit unit that goes through, calls for service to make sure that officers turned on body-worn camera, it's properly documented, it's properly categorized, so we can always find it. And anyone who doesn't do that gets sent to the Public Integrity Division for investigation. Those numbers have drastically decreased in my 6 years here to a handful at this point.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So you're saying to your knowledge, there have been no instances where there's been some complaint against an officer, that officer should have had his camera on, and therefore we were not able to see the camera.
If they should have had it on pursuant to policy, I don't have no complaint where if you've had it on pursuant to policy, that they didn't have it on. Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn it off to my colleagues. I'm sure they have a ton of questions as well. I'll turn over to Vice Chair Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to both BPD and OECR and the gentleman from the PABACC. So bigger picture, and I'm not sure if this is for one of the agencies or for the mayor's office or who, but this whole question about independent oversight, this is something that I've heard from a couple different members of the public who are in the social justice and, police accountability space and whatnot, that there's concern over this whole idea of reporting ultimately to the mayor and the implications of that being dependent on, we have a mayor who's, in my impression, really pretty sympathetic to these concerns now. There's no guarantee of that in the future. What is the administration's stance on this conversation around independent oversight of these processes?
Councilman Nina Themelis, Director of Government Relations for Mayor Scott. I don't have a specific response to your question, but what I do know is that the mayor supports robust oversight of the police department through the Police Accountability Board and the ACC. We have supported legislation in Annapolis to ensure that the PAB and ACC have all of the necessary authority to pursue their cases in a similar way, equal to or greater than what the Civilian Review Board had. So that gives some insight into the mayor's perspective as far as making sure that the PAB and ACC have all of the tools and resources that they need. But as far as having a distinct independent element, I don't believe that he has stated publicly anything along those lines. And I believe the Office of Equity and Civil Rights has been operating oversight over the PAB and ACC in a way that the body is able to perform its casework in a manner that is not necessarily under the direct direction of OECR. So it has an independent component to it. Thank you.
Okay. The question makes sense though, right? The idea of something akin to like an inspector general where there is like, sort of verified independence. It's not like there's no ability for it to go up a chain of kind of appointed command and whatnot. I think I'll just kind of, for now, just say that I think that is a really fair concern that I've heard from several different folks, and I think it's an important conversation to have moving forward. The second question, and I apologize, a lot of great data here, and y'all might have covered it and I might have missed it. The timeline from when the civilian files a complaint to the deadline and to when the OECR determination is, it's about 364 days or something like that is the no later than amount. Is that correct?
So can you repeat that part of the question one more time?
Yeah. So the flow chart for the amount of time from when a civilian files a complaint to when OECR has to send their determination, you have up to 364 days for that process. Is that correct?
It's 334 days now.
Okay.
And so that is the time. So when a complaint is filed, it has to be investigated within that specific time frame. So that is a change that went through on October. Oh, sorry. Let me let my deputy clarify additional information.
How you doing? Delegate Young, Deputy Director Young. The legislation that passed provided for a required 334-day investigatory period from filing to the time that the police or the law enforcement agency has to provide the investigatory file to the Administrative Charging Committee. Following that 334-day period is up to 60-day period for the ACC to be able to make their determination. This is a change as of October the 1st from the previous timeline, which was 1 year and 1 day from the filing of a complaint for the entire process.
Wait, so it went from being 365 days to being 300 and it's now 334 plus 60 days?
That's correct.
I guess
It's up to, so it's not a total additional 60 days. Like if the ACC needed additional time, as I mentioned before, the ACC hears a number of cases, 23 on average a week. And what we're finding is that they're doing a lot of work, right? They're in there every Friday reviewing those cases. So to ensure that we have enough time for the ACC to adequately review each of the cases, they have up to that additional time if there's additional information that they're requested. But generally speaking, the ACC has heard, I mean, they've heard all the cases within the 30-day time frame, but there are instances where they may need additional time.
It wasn't made to extend the process. It was made to reduce the process. So it took from a law enforcement agency from 365 to 334, essentially taking 30 days away. And then what it did is it allowed for the ACC, in case there was questions about the investigation, if they want to follow up, to give them time to come back to the agency before it actually has to be heard by the board, or a final decision made by the board. So it was really made to make the agencies work quicker.
Yep.
And get an answer out, because the ultimate answer is to get to the public an answer, right?
Right.
And to get the officer an answer. Like either you did something, you didn't do something, here's the penalty. And for the public to know, like it was investigated and they were penalized. So it was made to speed it up by 30 days.
Okay. And I apologize, did y'all, if you provided and I missed it, my apologies. Do you have data on like the average amount of times that these, that like complaints are being addressed and a determination is being provided?
What are we at now? 2:30. So we do provide that to the court overall, not just ACC, but including all cases. It's around 235 days average. I will tell you though, some cases are very quick, right? It's easy to see. It's not that many people to investigate. Some of them there's five officers, 10 allegations. It takes longer. So there's a wide discrepancy in that. I will tell you that one of the reasons why officers like body-worn camera is body-worn camera normally tells the truth. It's there, it's audio,
Yeah.
it's videoed. Officers tend to love it 98% of the time. If they didn't do anything wrong, it exonerates them. So they do like the body-worn camera. So depending on the complexity of the case, depends on how long it takes, but the average is 235 days.
Okay, yeah, and I would assume that the failure to operate body-worn camera is like more straightforward and more to Aaron's point, like these are things the ACC is catching in there. Like y'all's explanation there made sense to me. But for kind of in general, to your point about, if I'm a member of a public who's filed a complaint and it takes a year or more to hear that, and if I'm the police officer who like has this hovering over my head for, so I'd like to make a committee request. If we could have, and we can remove the body-worn camera data from, I guess, well, let's keep it in there. But for the top categories of allegations, the average length of time for each of those, like in days that each of those gets a determination, and then the number of cases that basically go to the deadline.
Councilman? So the caution I have is that those are allegations, those are not complaints, right? So there could be 3 of those in one complaint. And so the complaint gets done at the end and all allegations within it then pop up. So it would be a misrepresentation to say that in that, let's say we were doing body-worn camera. The body-worn camera might have been figured out in 2 days, but the use of force might have been figured out in 180 days. Therefore, it's going to show 180 days for a body-worn camera and that, because the complaint itself gets completed at the same time.
What's the better way to word that request then? Is it for that allegation?
Well, so the allegation is going to be the complaint. And what I'm saying is if there's 5 allegations in one complaint, regardless of when they figured out any portion of it, it's all going to have the same date. So it's going to misrepresent the date.
I got you. Yeah, and I don't want to misrepresent any of the data, and I think you also understand the concern here of like of
So
the
I
things
could-
that are.
Yeah, the concern we have, right, and the court has, of course, is the length of time it takes to do cases. I will tell you that we have been working on civilian investigators to assist. We have been increasing the amount of members of the agency. We have a brand new hiring campaign, which is proven to be very effective. We're getting more people in the agency, but we have to follow COMAR state regulations. It takes a long time to get people trained, get them through the process, get them on the street, et cetera. So we are trying to increase under our
The capacity
plan,
to reduce
the
the-
number of
sure.
investigators to do those cases. The problem is we have to absorb the lack of people in all areas of the department, right? Homicide doesn't get some,
Sure.
CID doesn't get some, patrol doesn't get some. We have to absorb it across the board, and right now it's sort of evenly spilled across the board. So the goal is to get more people in PID to do these cases and do them quicker. But the goal also is to get more people in districts so they can respond to calls quicker. So it's a bit of a balance that the commissioner and I and the other deputy have to do. And so that's what we do. At the end of the day, our goal is to always add more officers, right? We have 100 more than we had before, next another 100. It'll take a couple years to get us back up to staff so we can fully have people at full staff. But until we get there, it is going to be almost necessarily impossible to reduce down to what would be perfect would be 30 days. But we're going to be a long way if we get into 30 days.
And yeah, that would be great to include like the steps that you're taking to reduce it, but I still want to have the committee request in so we can just have a clear understanding so I'll ask for the committee request, and I guess this would be for OECR, to have the allegations broken down by the categories listed in your big 5 categories, with just the average number of days per type.
So,
So the average, you can go ahead.
Sorry, Councilman. So just wanted to flag that, I mean, we can break it down by allegation, but just for this conversation, the average for OECR is 21 days turnaround time on average for all of them, but we can break it out.
Wait, what was the 235 days?
That's BPD investigative time. He's talking about ACC turnaround time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think both of those are, 21 days sounds not a concern. So I think the main concern, so I guess the request is for BPD then.
I liked it better when you're looking over there, actually.
Yeah.
But,
So for
but,
us-
but they don't, they're
Can I
not
make-
going to have the
Can I make a
number.
recommendation here? It
Yeah.
sounds like you want, you want to understand the amount of time it
Right.
and there are various timestamps. There's the moment that a resident or a citizen comes in and says, look, I feel this was wrong. And they bring that to either OECR or to the police department. That is going to be timestamped. From that point, OECR is either going to forward it over within 3 days, as they are required to do, to the police department. That should be timestamped. If the police department has to then sort out I don't want to use the wrong word, not complaint, it's allegation. If they want to sort out that allegation into a complaint or a list of complaints, that may take some time, 200 days. That should get a timestamp. Once an allegation becomes a complaint, is that fair to say?
Yes. Where we're going to have the issue is when a complaint comes in and it has 3 allegations, because it's going to misrepresent the length of time it took to do the allegations, because it's going to be all going to be stamped the same date when the case itself is completed and it goes over there. So, and if you have 3 allegations, which may fall into the 5 buckets.
I got a question. Do we have like a tracking number for these things?
We have a what?
A tracking number. So when someone submits I feel like that wasn't
Yes.
fair, what happened or what, do we give them any sort of tracking number to follow up on their case?
Yeah, so if you file electronically, you automatically get a tracking number. You actually get a email kickback every time it moves through the stages.
So can we try as best as possible, because I want to make sure the councilman gets his requests. I think, am I getting to what you're trying to get to here, Councilman? Or am I missing the point?
But that's by case, not allegation.
Look, I'm not, what I want to know is when someone, like, how long, when someone files when they file their complaint initially, like, how long can they expect to hear something? That's the big picture. I'm not trying to, like, misrepresent it. If there's a better way to explain it, then please do that. But you get where I'm trying to go with this.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to get to. I would just say the average is 235. That is the average. Agreed that if you have a serious misconduct allegation, it could take longer. If you have a more minor allegation, it could be shorter, but the overall average is 235. The hard part about doing it by allegation is it's not block stamped by allegation, it's block stamped by case, like the chairman was talking about. So I know when the case came in, I know when the case went out, but each allegation within the case, I don't know when that was completed, and the member of the public wouldn't get notified until the entire case is completed. So if there's 3 allegations, and you figure out one right away, and it takes you a while to get the next 2, they're all going to be sent to the complainant at the same time, which is when the case is completed.
So you can have multiple people, for instance, complain about their interaction with an officer.
Well, they may not realize, so you may come complain about discourtesy, right? But when we look it up, we may say, okay, well, number 1, you didn't turn your body-worn camera on time, so you have a body-worn camera violation. You have a discourtesy violation. You may not have written a report, which you should have. Now you have a neglect violation. So you could have 3 violations. Even though the complainant didn't know that, we know that. So now you have 3 allegations. All those allegations are going to be open and closed the same day, even though, and let's say there's a use of force. Use of force would take a little bit longer. So even though you might have figured out from the beginning, like there's a body-worn camera violation, you can see it, is not going to get closed out until the case gets closed out. So the date is going to be misrepresented for violations or allegations.
And the complainant's not going to get any of this information until the full thing is completed?
Well, they'd be interviewed, and then when it's completed, they'd be notified.
I mean, then I think that's what I'm trying to get at. So I don't think it's being misrepresented. I think that's the information I'm trying to.
So the average would be 235.
For sake of time, I feel like we're talking in circles. I'm going to ask, we're going to note that there's a request from the councilman, and I'm going to ask that we take the rest of this conversation offline and verify in writing whatever the language is, so that we can get a breakdown of the dates.
Mr. Chair, actually, I think that the request is, I would like to know the average length of time per these 5 categories of allegations.
So that's the issue. The problem is the allegations, there might be more
You're
than.
saying that it doesn't fall within the categories.
Well, there might be more than one.
That they
That's
break
the
across
issue.
the categories.
So it's going to be
That's-
skewed.
okay.
So what I'm happy to do is, I'm always happy to give you a briefing about what you actually are trying to do, but that's why he's saying the average is 233, because it's impossibility to say, because like we said, a body-worn camera, you might be right, that one might be small, but if it involves other things, and then it can totally grow into something else. Like discourtesy, you might need to interview people, you might want to do some outside investigations. So the complainant isn't going to know until everything is in one package. So I'm happy to do an offline briefing, though. We can set it up.
All right, I'm going to stop it here so that we can give other folks an opportunity to ask their questions, and ask that the councilman work with you guys to clarify exactly that request. I'm going to turn it over to Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. This question has to do with the 286 officers that you mentioned earlier in the presentation. How many of those officers came from other jurisdictions?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would like that as an official committee request, looking at the 286 officers that you mentioned earlier in the presentation. How many of them came from other jurisdictions, and particularly from where?
So if I could clarify, so that 286 number that's here lists the number of officers with 2 or more complaints. Is that what you're referencing?
That's what I'm referencing, yeah.
So those officers would have to fall within the this is all BPD's numbers. So these are only BPD officers.
No. So I'm not asking about whether they're currently BPD officers. I'm following a trend of where they came from. So if they're here for a particular time,
Understood.
how long were they here, and then also if they came from other jurisdictions. The reason why I bring that up is because I've been been on this thread of line of questioning regarding officers from other jurisdictions, and if they are coming from other jurisdictions, whether they have the cultural competency and/or practice to serve in Baltimore communities. And so that's the main genesis and intent of my question. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Gray. Glover. Parker. You weren't ready, were you? I think your mic isn't working. Maybe push it in. If you push the mic in.
There you go. Thank you very much. Oh, working too much now. Very good. We began some of this conversation a bit when we were talking about body-worn cameras and like the percentage involved in that. I'd be curious. I really appreciate this slide here, looking at the OECR director. Thank you. In terms of the type of misconduct allegations, I would love to see those same categories for the 320 and the 211. Those who accepted ACC recommended discipline and who elected trial board, just to see how, and again, I think we're talking allegations and allegations, so I don't think we're running into the same challenge with complaints here, because this is the tail end of the process from an ACC standpoint. So of those categories listed there, how do those break down between the 320 and 211? Just to have some sense of what kinds of things are making it to trial board, what kinds of things are just receiving the discipline without a trial board. And that same data would then also tell us what kinds of the allegations heard, which of them, what's the breakdown of what's actually sustained versus what's kind of set aside as not needing further action. So that would be my request.
Understood. And I think that would be for BPD because they're
We have it.
for the BPD
We have it.
discipline.
We'll get it.
Great, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's my question for right now.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have some clarifying questions because I haven't been a part of the other hearings. The complaints versus the accusations, I just heard this conversation about it. Is there a reason why we can't get the same breakdown for complaints that we see in allegations, this slide? Because I'd like to see, for instance, the line that says, let's see, these slides don't have numbers. This slide here that has a police accountability summary, like these numbers of cases, but also like broken down by type of complaint, because that would help us.
Can I see which slide you're looking at, ma'am?
This slide here that talks about the complaints. Number of complaints received by BPD involving a member of the public. Number of BPD officers with complaints involving a member of the public. Number of BPD officers with 2 more complaints involving a member of the public. Number of cases investigated. You know, I'd like to get that broken down by type of complaint. Is there a reason we can't
So
do that?
when you say type of complaint, are you talking about allegation?
Sure.
So,
My understanding was that there's a difference between allegation and complaint.
So,
That there was this
yeah.
conversation that you just had with my colleague.
Correct.
Was that the allegation comes in, but then you escalate it to a complaint when there's actually like something to escalate.
So a complaint is like a folder, and the allegations are the policy violations that may have occurred. So the pie chart you see from the ACC are allegations. A complaint isn't an allegation. A complaint is just a folder for which all the allegations for that one person who filed a complaint exist. So the pie chart you have is the pie chart they created based on 2025, the complaints that came in 2025 that they received. That is the pie chart for the 2025 complaints, broken down by allegation. Because the complaint is just the case. It's a folder. the allegations is what we investigate.
Oh, okay, so complaint, I mean, you could have just said number of, so, well, building up of allegations results in a complaint.
Any one allegation is at least, is one complaint, one folder.
Sure.
And then if we see other allegations during
Okay.
the investigation, we add them to that one investigation.
Okay. Are you disturbed at all that the top number here, number of complaints received by BPD involving a member of the public, is like half of the officers in the,
Yeah, so those don't necessarily mean those are individual officers. One officer could have 2, 3, 4 complaints. So, no. I mean, you also get a complaint if you, well, I wouldn't go to the ACC, but overall numbers, you can get complaints. If you're on a DAT team, if you're active, if you're out there, if you're in patrol, you tend to get more complaints than administrative areas get. So, no, I mean, it's not concerning. We have another system that puts a lot of data together. It's called our early intervention system that look at this, look at other things to ping up, what I'll call pinging up the officers that we need to be concerned about. But I would just say, because the number says it's not necessarily half, those could be the same officer with 3 or 4 allegations.
which actually is more disturbing, by the way. That they would have.
It should really be disturbing because we add so many allegations to a complaint that we receive. We add every possible allegation to it. So we add them, and then we subtract them as we investigate them to make sure that we look at the entire possible violations and then narrow it down to, is there a sustained violation? So we add allegations, so we add many more that ever get sustained because we want to make sure that we don't miss anything.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're trying to have better reporting to be able to understand the totality of the issue. And so the more that you can add allegations to that complaint or to that person, you kind of get a better picture of actually what's happening.
Correct. And our intake folks, which are sworn supervisors, review it to make sure that they add them so that when the investigators get them, because investigators have 35, 40 cases, they have a lot, that they don't miss something. So the supervisors that review them when they first come in, look and add every possible violation so that the investigators, when they're looking at them, that's all been put in. They're not like looking for something else. Like it's been put in by a supervisor ahead of time. So allegation numbers really mean not all that much to me, only because we add so many allegations just to make sure that everything gets fully investigated.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll probably have a follow-up.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the Police Accountability Board, do you have any vacancies? You do.
We have 3 vacancies in Council Districts 7, 10, and 11, I believe, right? 7, 10, and 11. Those have been vacant for some time.
Okay. And one other question I have was, does the Police Accountability Board have an independent budget?
Your question was, does the Police Accountability Board have an independent budget?
Yeah.
The budget for the entire office is within the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. And so in the budget that we have for the PAD, it covers the entire division, which covers salaries, which covers any fees, it covers stipends for the ACC and PAB members, and any other outreach and engagement. But that budget information was shared with the council in June, I believe.
And one other question is, can the public file a complaint with the, can the public file a complaint with the Police Accountability Board?
Absolutely. So complaints can be filed through any number of entities. It can be filed directly with our office, online. It can be filed in person at a BPD precinct. And we do a lot of outreach and education, and we definitely extend that to our council members as well, to make sure that people in their districts know that they can file complaints if they have been harmed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I have one other question, and it's to BPD. So about a year ago, can you hear me? Okay, so about a year ago, I had an officer in the Eastern District that was transferred to, I want to say, I think it was like the family division or something. She was a community patrol officer that was transferred down to the family division. But when she was there, she made a complaint to me in reference to some type of sexual harassment, right? And she then filed a complaint. She didn't really know which way to turn because she was getting like a lot of pushback, but she then turned to individuals that was on the Police Accountability Board, which, you know, they mentioned they had kind of sort of the time like no power to do anything. What I want to know is what is like the process and what does that look like when an officer is filing some type of harassment amongst another police officer, but feel like they can't really speak on it because of they probably being like ostracized or pushed out of the division?
Sure. So with respect to harassment, I'm guessing you're talking about sexual harassment in this case. The member can file with the Equal Opportunity and Diversity section of the Baltimore Police Department, which I believe I know the case you're talking about. This member actually did, but that's not where
You say you do know what I'm talking about?
But I can't talk about the case, but I'm just saying that, you know, the member has a right to file with the Equal Opportunity and Diversity section of the Baltimore Police Department. And whatever that outcome is, if they're not satisfied, they can also go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission or the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights or even the Community Relations Commission of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. So they have all their alternatives outside the police department if they're not satisfied with the outcome within the police department.
So them filing a complaint with the, you said what you say, the Public Service Commission, what did you say again?
So they have, externally, they have 3 other agencies they could go to. So that would be Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that is federal. They could go to the state Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, so that's with the state, or they could go to the Community Relations Commission with the Office of Equity and Civil Rights.
Okay. Or you can get it right within the Baltimore City
That
Police
is correct.
Department.
That is correct. And that's why I said if they're not satisfied with the outcome, these are other avenues. So it doesn't end with the police department, assuming that, you know, whatever the outcome is not one they're satisfied with. They can go externally and still file that same complaint with any of those bodies.
And Councilman, I will just say that all investigations that are completed within the Public Integrity Division not only go to a sergeant or lieutenant to review, they also go to a captain and a major to review. And for the most part, we'll get a legal review as well. So although some people, and I'm not speaking about this case, although some people do believe that, you know, they are right and the department is incorrect, we have to go based on the evidence that's available at the time of the investigation. There are a lot of times when people...
Excuse me, when you say some people, you're talking about officers, right?
No, I'm
the
saying
officers.
any public or an officer. I'm saying in general. They maybe believe they're right, but we have to go by what the evidence shows and what data we have. Sometimes it comes down to he said, she said. That's why we have a not sustained. Like, it's not more likely than not that either way happens, so it's not sustained. But they do get a legal review, and to make sure that nothing was missed, there's nothing else to show, because anybody can charge somebody, anybody can sustain a case, and I say this to the ACC people, you can charge anybody. You have to get through a trial board, right? A trial board is just like going to court, right? There is a judge, there is a panel, there is a prosecutor, there is a defense attorney. Defense attorneys are very good. You have to be able to show the evidence to show that it was more likely than not that something happened. So even though a person individual believes they are correct, you still have to be able to convince a judge and a panel that you are correct, and it has to be, they have to believe you and find guilt. That is a tough road to hoe sometimes when the evidence doesn't line up correctly. So we don't charge people unless legal, who has to prosecute it, you know, believes that they're going to be able to prosecute it. If they're not going to be able to prosecute it, it is a waste of taxpayer money, because we have to pay for a judge, we have to pay for the panel, we have to pay for the lawyers, we have to pay, there's a lot of money that goes into that. So we don't charge people lightly. We make sure that the evidence is accurate and that legal has looked at it because they're the ones that have to prosecute it. And if we can't prosecute somebody, you know, at the end of the day, we spent thousands and thousands of taxpayer dollars to get a not guilty, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking to make sure that
I understand that too, but what if the officer is requesting to have a transfer within that particular part of the agency, and that transfer is denied, and they're still working alongside this officer who, you know, they made allegations of this individual has sexually harassed them. What gets done in that case?
Yeah, I don't want to get into a specific case. I'll just say in general, we have a transfer process that someone must go through, and there are specifications listed in every job description that you must meet in order to be able to be transferred. So I hate to say it, but anybody can get transferred to patrol because everybody has worked patrol. It's when they want to go to specialty units across the board that if you don't make the qualification or there's not a posting or you didn't go through the process and get selected, you can't. Anybody can transfer to patrol, anybody. That's an easy one. We're always looking for people in patrol. But people sometimes will want to transfer somewhere else, and it's like, yeah, you have to go through a process for that. So just filing a complaint doesn't get you a transfer. They have to follow the transfer policy.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow up later.
Thank you, Councilman. I got a couple questions about the Administrative Charging Committee's ability to request information. So according to the state law, the ACC has the ability to request information or action from the law enforcement agency that conducted the investigation, including requiring additional investigation and the issuance of subpoenas. Now, we talked about this a little earlier in the hearing. I'm curious for the department, what is your understanding of BPD's obligation to provide additional information and to complete additional investigatory steps requested by the ACC? Is the BPD required to comply with these requests, or does the BPD have the option to refuse to comply with those requests?
So if we get a request from the ACC and if it's a request about the investigation that took place and a follow-up to that request, yes.
You have it, you can?
We will comply with the request, yes.
Are there circumstances under which you don't comply?
So let's say they sent over and they asked us to investigate someone else. That would require us to open up another investigation and to go through the process. Because under the state statute that you referred to, there is a process we have to follow, and so we have to follow that process. So if they send over and say, well, we want the sergeant interviewed because of X, Y, Z, and that is now coming to our attention, we would then open up a separate investigation if we hadn't already investigated it, because they need to be served notice of investigation, et cetera. But I honestly don't know. Hold on.
Jasmine, you getting a little...
Yeah, I would like to chime in. I've been sitting over here for a little while, wanted to make some commentary about a few points. But as far as, you know, our requests for BPD to do additional investigation, there are times where our requests have been ignored. We've received an answer, but it's not responsive. And as far as like us directly asking them to open back up the investigative report to supplement it because there are lots of things missing, we have not received compliance whatsoever, not one time. And, you know, so that's something that we have experienced. And so there are also times where we will see a case and the respondent of the complaint, the officer, the subject officer, is identified, but then there are other officers around that should have also been identified as respondents. And so there are times where, you know, and we've had to work through, like, how do we do this, where we want to tell BPD that, hey, these other officers should have been charged with X, Y, and Z, right? And what we were advised was that we would need to sort of make a request to the PAB. The ACC would make a request to the PAB, who would then sort of file the complaint on our behalf to include those other officers in that case that we saw. There are times where we will open up a case and we will see that additional allegations should have been made against the officer and investigated. So we've sent back cases where we say, hey, this also happened, but it wasn't mentioned in the report. Can you do an analysis under this policy, make it a determination about this conduct that we saw? You know, we will receive answers, but again, I could say, and I'm pretty sure my colleagues will probably agree with me that they tend not to be responsive, on point, right? They'll talk around exactly what we're asking for at times.
Sure.
There was also mention about about body-worn camera footage and officers not turning on their body-worn cameras on time. Well, I can tell you there are cases that we receive where the allegation is more than just a body-worn camera allegation. It is an allegation like BP, it is a body-worn camera plus it's I was harassed or this, that, and the third. Well, the body-worn camera wasn't turned on. So we don't have evidence, right, to charge or not charge, right? Like, I mean, well, not necessarily, we don't have evidence to charge. So we do see the body-worn camera issue because the officer didn't turn it on time, or there are times where the officer hadn't turned on the body-worn camera at all. You know, so the allegation, right, that sprung from the interaction between the member of the public and the police officer wasn't captured at all. I don't know what then to do other than not charge because there isn't a preponderance of evidence that is available to us to actually make a charging decision. There are also times where we'll receive a file and because the investigation took so long to get started, CCTV evidence, video evidence from a store or the inside of wherever is no longer available because it's been rolled over, right, within 90 days or within whatever the policy is of the store or the establishment is, right? So, there'll be times where, we just don't have that information. And then regarding just the point the Vice Chair was raising about the discussion between a complaint and an allegation. I mean, here's the thing. The fact of the matter is that people want to know how long it takes a complaint to go from A to B, not necessarily the allegations within it, right? So the fact of the matter is when the ACC, when we receive an investigative file, we receive the file along with all of the, hopefully all the allegations that come along with it, then we make a decision. That's how OCRE is able to say, hey, this is our turnaround, right? Because this is when we get the case, this is how long it takes us to process it, ACC gets it, ACC makes a decision. It should be the same for BPD, not necessarily trying to break it out by allegation, because in my mind, just from my perspective, that's a head fake. That's a red herring, throw the allegations out there to get you. Look, let's look at the cases. When was the complaint filed? When did you get it over to ACC or OECR, right? Regardless of how many allegations are in there, right? So I just wanted to make those points.
You said a lot there, and I think,
Chairman.
Please, Deputy Commissioner.
Yes, I will tell you that every request that comes from OECR to BPD is responded to, every request. I know of no cases where we didn't respond. I have no idea why anything would have to go to the PAB to file a separate complaint. Never heard that since this law has been passed. And I know of no cases when an officer was required to have their body-worn camera on and something wasn't captured on the body-worn camera, maybe a late activation, but it's captured on the body-worn camera. So I will just say that anything that comes from OECR to BPD is responded to, and the information is sent back. As long as it falls within the statute. We follow the statute 100%.
So I see people moving in their seats, a lot of discomfort in this conversation, which is good. It's kind of the reason why we're here. Because what I'm hearing is not always the same thing from different people, and so getting everybody in the same room makes it easier to sort out these things. I don't know that we're necessarily going to solve whether maybe everything is responded to, but I think that is maybe a different question than whether or not the request is attended to. So if they're asking for additional interviews or additional charges, and that's not what comes out, but maybe you get a response, yes, we've received a response, no, we're not going to do the investigation any further. That is still a response, but not necessarily following the request of the ACC. And maybe that's not what you're saying, but I could see some way in which you can not necessarily meet the request that they put forward.
We comply with every request that falls within the statute. That is what we do. We have a legal team that reviews.
Okay.
We follow every request that's required by the statute.
So that goes back to the question that I asked a little bit earlier. Are there circumstances in which you do not comply with a request?
Actually, I can't think of one, but I'm not saying there isn't one.
Okay.
I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'm just saying if it falls within the statute, it is completed.
Okay.
Just
Please,
do want to say
Director.
one thing. There have been a very small number of instances where there have been ACC requests that have gone to BPD that were not answered. But again, that number is very small. It's
Okay.
not the norm, because additionally, when we do have the ACC hearings every Friday, there is a BPD officer, I believe, assigned to us and assigned to the ACC to answer those questions in real time if something is missing. But there is a question on when the ACC does see additional things that they may capture in their review of the files. And that remains a question of how to address those moving forward. And what our advice has been is that you would file another complaint to move forward that process if there are additional things that come forward.
Sure. What I think we'll do from here is if we could have, I don't think you're able to give us explicit details, but just types of examples where this has happened, and please share that with the committee. Maybe that'll help us understand where's the gap in understanding between what the ACC has requested and maybe what has been delivered from the police department, so that we can verify, but even further settle whatever disagreement we're sorting out right now. Is that okay?
Cases are expired, I mean, they're done at this point, so it's not
Okay.
a look back to see if there was anything pending. So I don't know if that is.
Okay, if they are settled and all is done, then if you could share the information or the instances where we've requested information and the police department did not meet your expectations, that'd be very helpful. But I'm understanding from the deputy commissioner that they pretty much always follow through, that this should not happen. Is that fair to say?
Yes, if OECR has a request that they sent to us that we did not respond to, I would love to see it. Or if the response back was we're not doing it, I would also love to see that.
And so, other question I have here is, does the law department advise on that process? You talked a little bit about it earlier. Where does the law department provide insight on this process? And do they determine at all what then goes to the ACC?
So the law department that's assigned to BPD, for the most part, besides doing trial boards, reviews cases before they go to the ACC to make sure that they're going to be able to charge it if it's a chargeable offense. And then when it comes back from the ACC, they review it as well, because they're the ones that actually have to prosecute it, to make sure that they, concur with what came back, and then put it on the list for prosecution or for trial boards.
So just to restate what you said, the role of the law department's review is to determine whether or not it's a chargeable offense?
So they look at it before it leaves BPD to make sure that they concur with the investigation, it was complete, and whatever BPD came up with a summary that they concur with it, because if it's chargeable, they're going to be the ones to prosecute it. Then it goes to the ACC. When it comes back from the ACC, they review again to see what the ACC charged with, because they're the ones that have to charge it. So just like any state's attorney's office, they're the prosecutors, so they look at it as well to make sure, because they're the ones going to have to prosecute it. In addition to that, they work with detectives along the way on some more complex investigations to make sure that it's moving in the right direction, that they concur with what's happening. They offer their suggestions if they have any along the way. So they're sort of available to the detectives to go ask information, or the supervisors to go ask information, because again, they're the ones that have to prosecute it. As I said before, we can charge anybody, we have to convict. And so they're the ones that do have to do the actual conviction.
Got it. So it sounds like the law department essentially makes sure that the package that goes to the ACC sort of meets legal requirements. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
And then for the ACC, how does the law department interface with you guys? If we're requesting information, what is their role? Because I think I see a scenario where the law department can sort of play both sides.
I mean, I can't speak for the law department and they're not here, but they have been, they're the city's lawyer, but they uphold the utmost value of the law. So whether they are working on behalf of BPD or working on advising the ACC or us or any other entity, they've shown no deference to, one way or the other. So it's upholding the law. So there isn't anything that the law department has not given us that we have not like if we ask for clarification on something, they do so. If the ACC wants to meet with the law department to ask for what their authorities are, they do that. So there isn't a question of whether the ACC can do, whether the law department can do both. They've shown that through the work here.
The sort of conflict of interest that I'm suggesting is the law department's goal is to sort of protect the city. That's their job. And generally that makes a lot of sense from a perspective of someone is suing the city. But when you have disputes between entities within the city, it gets a little bit wonky. So much so that the city council has its own lawyer that still technically rolls up to the law department, but interfaces a little bit differently and can provide legal advice that is separate from the law department. A different perspective sometimes on the law, which this is all arguments at the end of the day. So it sort of begs the question for me, are there circumstances under which the ACC and the Police Accountability Board might want a different perspective on how to go about something, but that may be in conflict with what the police department is suggesting or doing, such that the carriage of justice may be a little bit more difficult to follow through on because the ACC wants some information or wants to do something or further investigate something, but maybe for the police department.
I'll chime in here. Again, this is Shamaya Kearney, Deputy City Administrator. When there are cases where there is disagreement or there's not alignment on a position, there are opportunities to take something to the state's attorney's office or, to the attorney general's office if we feel like we need someone to kind of mitigate and determine whether the position that the law department has taken is factual in nature. And so I just want to be very careful because it sounds like we're questioning the integrity of the law department. I want to make sure that that's not the impression that we're giving and that we're not giving that impression to the public.
While I certainly respect that, I also know from personal experience, the AG is going to defer to Baltimore City Law Department every time when we're talking about laws at the local level. Now, the AG will, of course, have broader jurisdiction and more of a say-so on the state law regarding police accountability. But on the law that we drafted, the law department is going to really kind of reign supreme there. So I think, what I'm suggesting is I think we want to find a way to make sure that there is no conflict or to reduce it to the greatest degree possible. Much like in the same way that the city council has a separate lawyer that, helps us look at strategy from a different perspective. But Jasmine, anything you want to add there? I mean, you're a lawyer. So
yeah, the thing is that, how do I say this? Going back to my testimony, you know, I've been in this field here in Baltimore City for 10 years. I started under the Rawlins Blake administration, then it went over to Pugh, then Young, now Scott. My lens is a bit wider when it comes to my view of the law department. I don't necessarily have a duty to not question the law department's I guess
Influences
yeah,
or
influence at
leanings.
times. I was trying to come up with the right word. Because I've seen what the law department can do when it actually is not in alignment with robust and effective civilian oversight. And I can say that earlier this year, we actually wrote a memo wrote a letter to the law department asking questions about ambiguities in our implementing ordinance that the committee has been the ACC has been grappling with, because we've noticed that there are certain things in the law that I guess, you know, we have the power to do that wasn't necessarily being followed. So we wanted an opinion from the law department sort of fleshing out what does the law mean? And, you know, from my vantage point, the responses that we got, I don't necessarily think reflect what is sort of like the plain language of the law, particularly regarding if we did have to issue a subpoena, for example, if we had to subpoena information. This is theoretical. I mean, we've have had one discussion about possibly issuing a subpoena, but we didn't do it. But, you know, when it came to the possibility of subpoenaing the police department for evidence, we were advised that we could not. The language of the implementing ordinance appears to say that we could if we wanted to, but we were advised that we couldn't. So.
Chair Conway, I'm going to respectfully request that you, since the law department is not here to opine or to be able to respond to any of these allegations, that you either make requests directly to the law department and/or at the next hearing, you ask for the law department to have a representative present so that this discussion can be held where they have an opportunity to be able to respond. I don't think it's my responsibility,
Sure.
OECR, BPD, or anyone else to be able to opine on behalf of the law department, and I would like for them to have an opportunity to be responsive.
I agree with you 100%. I will say this, I'll make a formal request from the committee on exactly that matter regarding subpoenas from the law department to clarify what they meant by that decision. Because I read straight from the law earlier, the ACC has the ability to request information or action from the law enforcement agency that conducted the investigation, including requiring additional investigation and the issuance of subpoenas. So I'm no lawyer. It's pretty plain to me, though. So I'd be very curious to hear how that interpretation works, and you know, one, how it works legally, and two, how it works in practice. You know, maybe we never need a subpoena because the police department, or at least this police commissioner and this deputy commissioner, is always willing to sort of meet the requests of the ACC, which is great. But when I wrote this bill, and you know, there are only a few people here who remember when I wrote this bill. When I wrote the bill, I kept referring to a case in which we had Mayor Donald Trump. And there could be a scenario, or Commissioner Donald Trump, that just wants to do what he wants to do and finds every gap within our law to move forward. So I think we want to be tight in these regards. And we're fortunate to have a police department that is working with us, a deputy commissioner that is working hard to make sure that we provide the service that is necessary to have true justice here. But in a scenario where we don't, I want to make sure that our laws are tight.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I know that we do have the chair of the ACC here, Ms. Tiara Hawks, so I don't know if there's something that she would care to share, given her expertise in this area
Ms.
as well.
Hawks, please. Press the right, there we go, every time.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Tiara Hawks, Chair of the ACC. I bring greetings from the ACC. I was not invited to speak, so I haven't prepared anything for this hearing, but I would have appreciated the opportunity to actually speak on behalf of the ACC. Thank you, Mr. Riggins. I really appreciate everything that you said so far. What I will say is that I think what we are seeing here is that this is a new process. It's never been done before. And so what we see parties and individuals who want this process to work. And there's going to be bumps, and there's going to be things that aren't making sense. They don't go together, things, data, just everything. We talked about a lot today. So what I will say is that I'm available to address any concerns about the ACC, and what we have always done is to go to the OECR to ask them questions. We have asked the advice of the law department. We have had conversations with BPD, so I think the process is working in that way, that we are having those conversations. And I think these hearings are opportunities for us to see where we are not connecting and where we are disconnecting. And so I appreciate the conversation, but if there's any questions specifically to the ACC, since I am the chair of the ACC, I would respectfully request that they be directed to me. I think we have very passionate members on a lot of our boards, and sometimes the way that I lead a group is not the same way that another person may lead a group. So I would like to address questions in a way that I think is a little more, how can I say it? Structured. Yes, thank you. All right, and that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hawks. Any further questions?
I just wanted to know, Mr. Young, can you comment?
We can't hear you, Councilman.
Sorry. Mr. Young, or someone from your team, can you characterize like the relationship that you have with the Baltimore City Police Department and also with the ACC?
With the police department and the ACC, I would definitely defer also to my director to supplement my answer. But I think we work well with the police department. We've had growing pains with this process, but everybody shows up to work every day trying to figure it out and do the right thing. I think that applies across the board. I do think that there is an opportunity with members of the Police Accountability Board to demonstrate. We hear a lot of conversation about independence and separation from OECR in this process. I think it's important that there is a fiduciary that is accountable to making sure that things are done right. And right now, that's a structure that we have. Candidly, we haven't seen that engagement consistently with each member of the Police Accountability Board, such that I would entrust them with independence yet. It's important that people show up. And that includes when we have engagement with the community. That includes in-person meetings. Right now, that is not a consistency. Now, when it comes to the ACC, they work every day, every week, and they get it done. So, I do believe that the working relationship has been really strong with them as well. The ACC and the PAB, I think our relationship has tremendously been improving over the last year, where we've been able to put together joint events and, do a lot of programming. We just secured the grant with them from the state. So I think that things are moving in the right direction, but at the same time, I think that there's a prudence before, there's a lot of rhetoric, but there's a prudence to making sure that this works. And we can't risk it not working. And currently, we've got a structure where we can sit before you and be accountable to ensuring that it works, even when there's questions. But I don't know if that means that needs to be separated from the administration at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Chair, appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, Councilman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I think 3 small things here just to tie up some loose ends as I've been listening to the conversation. One, I'm curious, and this is for I think any of our 3 kind of mains, whether it's ACC, the chair, the member, OECR, or BPD. At what point in a review process would a history of past sustained allegations be introduced to the conversation? I'm just curious if there's at any point, because obviously each incident, each complaint is reviewed as its own separate thing. But at any point in the entire process, I guess probably on the ACC side, does that ever come in? I mean, obviously the ACC may remember, oh, this person has been with us before, but is there a formal way that that happens?
So actually, that comes into play in the statewide matrix. So when you get to the disciplinary section in the statewide matrix, you must take into account other like conduct that took place to decide whether or not it's an aggravating circumstance, a mitigating circumstance, first offense, second offense, or third offense. So it comes into play during the disciplinary matrix portion.
Excellent. I thought probably that's where it was. I really appreciate the explanation there. I know you, the Deputy Commissioner, you mentioned how much time and effort it's taken to set up trial boards and kind of get them moving again. And I can only imagine what that's been like. I know obviously, you know, the number here was 211. There's a lot of trial boards to be conducted at this point. I wonder in the future, when you all come back to us, if on that same page where you have number of members who accepted ACC recommended discipline, number of members who elected for a trial board, maybe also, well, it's a formal request, not a maybe, but number of trial boards completed, and I guess, I don't know what the language you used here, but sustained or not sustained, or whatever that language is, would be really helpful.
Guilty or not guilty? Yes.
Sure, yeah.
Yes, that's what it would be.
All right.
Yes, we can add that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The final thing, Deputy Commissioner, you mentioned, I think maybe on the complaint side, the way that the system and the process you all currently have is looking for patterns as early as possible to identify where, whether for individuals or for units, there may be something that needs extra attention. And I appreciate you lifting it up that way. Recognizing the complaints, as you pointed out, vary dramatically based on the kind of work that an individual officer or unit is asked to do, right? Because the nature of their work, how much time they spend directly engaging with the public and things like that. This isn't a formal question yet, because I want to hear your feedback first before deciding whether to rate. When we get all the way to sustained allegations, not complaints, when we get all the way to sustained allegations, that really helpful chart that you listed that describes the kind of sustained allegations, would it be helpful or unhelpful, do you think, for the committee to also see sustained allegations broken down by units or division or something like that would allow us to notice patterns? Or do you think that information would be in some way unhelpful?
So we look at that when the complaints first come in to see what units are in, to see if there's any repetition. The only thing I would caution is we have a lot of promotions, transfers within the agency. And so when they come back around, once the system's been updated because someone's been transferred, promoted, et cetera, it changes location. And so if we were to pull it today, let's say that we had a trial board today and we pulled it today, it may not be where they were when they actually had the violation, because the system, Workday, we all love, doesn't have that. And so it's gonna pull it by where they currently are at the end of the process. So we do on the upfront, in the first section on that chart, if you see where it says PID classification, look to see where units are and look for repeat offenders, repeat units, problems. And if we identify them, then we tackle them at the beginning, because usually it's training, speaking to the supervisor. Let's say we get a bunch of people in a certain unit that they're violating body-worn camera. We make sure we do a training up front, or sometimes we have people that are violating, it was on the transport vehicle, they weren't turning on the body-worn camera because there was a camera in the transport vehicle, we noticed it, it's a technical violation of the policy. We then make sure we send out notice that, no, you also have to have your body-worn camera on as well as that vehicle. Or we also use it to find out, is there a policy that's being misunderstood? Sure. So we can fix it or fix the policy. So we do that at the upfront. And we correct it then. I don't know if there's a way at the end when somebody's sustained to track that back. I'm afraid people will have moved because there's so much movement that the numbers aren't going to be a true representation of what actually is happening.
That's exactly the kind of helpful response I was looking for. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the narrative you just gave around just examples of when you have identified things, what that response has looked like. Again, not that that has to be comprehensive, but I think hearing at future hearings, be like, hey, in the last, however long it's been, in the last 6 months since we were here for this, here's an example of some of the things we identified and the trainings we implemented. That I think that would go a long way, certainly for me as not a committee member, but who's hanging out today.
And the examples I gave you are actual examples of things that did happen.
Exactly.
That we fixed.
Yeah, and so things like that I think is really helpful. So maybe if that's just simply part of your presentation, like, hey, as part of our review of complaints, here's some of the things we flagged and the steps we took. I think that's a really important part of the process, and it's sure. I think we and the public would love to hear kind of what that iterative step looks like. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I got two final thoughts here, and I see actually some deputy solicitors here, so we might actually have three things we discuss. First, Deputy Director, you said some I think poignant points, I think, around the administration of the Police Accountability Board and the ACC that I think are important. And I said some opening statements that referred to the sort of conflict of interest, I think one of the law department, I think two of the mayor's office in this process. And I think conceptually, a world in which an entity within the mayor's office has leeway or leverage over this process, there is bound to be at some point a conflict of interest. I mean, maybe everything that happens can theoretically be called a conflict of interest. And so I ask this as a theoretical, question or something for us to think about with the Office of Equity and Civil Rights being within the mayor's office. Can it do its job in a way that is totally independent and provide the autonomy necessary for the Police Accountability Board and for the ACC to successfully do its work and to bring back confidence, I think, in our police department? Because at the end of the day, my highest priority here is, one, to make sure that officers are held accountable in a way that is fair. And then two, that people know this process and believe in this process. And in a world where the folks administering the process are effectively an extension of the mayor's office, I think that gets kind of tough. And I'm not saying that to be rough or anything. But I think we all might conceptually ask that question. There will be a world in which the mayor does not want something bad coming out about the police department, period. And I think likewise for the police department, a world in which they don't want to necessarily talk about some investigation or provide enough information that might blow back on the higher ups. And so a subpoena would be important. So I think when I talk again about a scenario by which we have a sort of Trumpian-like personality in either the mayor's seat or the commissioner's seat, we do want to make sure that the law is sound and structurally strong. And I drafted this law, so this is criticism of myself. But this is an exercise in continual improvement. So as we talk about these things, I hope that no one takes this as any question on you, director, or you, deputy director, and your willingness to be partners, and you, deputy commissioner, or anybody in this room. I know we all want to see this work, but the questions that I'm asking are, I think, very real questions. You may not be in this seat in the future, and it may be somebody else that may be more pliable to the mayor or more pliable to the commissioner. And if the law is not strong enough, that could be a problem. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think for us, the integrity of the process is what it is, and we will continue to uphold that. For OECR's point in this, ours is just process. We are not the investigative authority. Our responsibility is to take in the complaint, file the paperwork that's needed to do, prepare the cases for the ACC, make sure if the PAB or ACC needs additional information that we are that conduit for that information. But in no way are we the investigative authority, so there isn't bias that we'd be able to introduce in the process, nor would we, because that's just not what my team is about. It's never what this office has been about. Our office is about upholding equity and civil rights, human rights across the city. Police department, they can speak for themselves in this process. I mean, it would be great if we don't have complaints. That's the fact of the
That's-
matter is that
that's
we
the
have
goal,
complaints, right? That's the goal. The goal is, yes, simplifying the process.
Yeah.
But the goal really is, let's limit the amount of complaints that are coming in so people
Mm-hmm.
can have due process when it comes to their interactions and humanity dealing with law enforcement.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to reiterate, so the department does not determine the outcome of investigations, right? We gather the evidence, we turn the evidence over to the ACC, they determine the charging document, they determine the penalty pursuant to the statewide matrix, which is very clear. Send it back to us. We can only increase the penalty, we cannot decrease the penalty, and then it can go to a trial board, they can accept it. At no point in any of this process does the BPD have the ability to determine an outcome. I don't care if we have 20 people on the outside telling us to make something.
That wasn't at all what I was
No, I
suggesting.
know. I'm just
Yeah,
saying, I just wanted to say, because I will say one thing goes well with the ACC or OECR is the process here works well because we work well together. We make sure stuff flows, and we've worked with them. And of course, as someone mentioned earlier, it's a newer statute. The process works well. Some of the things that we're looking for at the end, though, are there is no case law yet on this, on the MPA. LEOBR, which was the law of the land since 1974, I believe, had a plethora of case law which gave direction. This law has none. Actually, I don't think any of it's been challenged at all. Will judges in the future use some of the rulings from LEOBR to imply it into the statute? We don't know. So because, like any new law, it will get challenged at some point. Luckily, we've not been challenged yet, but somebody's going to get challenged, and we will see what the case law prevails. So some of this explicit language that's brought up, like, well, it doesn't say this, it's undetermined. The statute will get determined when it gets in front of a judge at some point and then make some judicial determinations. That just hasn't happened yet. In the meantime, though, I think it's great that the process is working well between OECR and BPD. So the stuff is flowing, the cases are going. Do we have some hiccups with trial boards? We do. But that's because it took so long to get a judge and a process on board for that. But we will get caught up. You know, when I came here in 2019, we were 125 trial boards behind. We actually got caught up to about 20. Now we're, hundreds behind again because of this new statute. We will get caught up. It's just going to be a bit of time to get there. But that is the ultimate goal.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, the way that I look at myself in this process, and I'm speaking for myself, not for the ACC or the board. Speaking for myself, who's invested in police accountability in the city. My whole goal is to help ensure that the police accountability system is as resilient as possible going forward. So I look at myself and the time that I have here doing this work is to help to set the foundation and poke and prod without necessarily feeling fear of being retaliated against for what I'm actually saying. I'm not, the thing that I guess is frustrating for me is that people may take what I'm doing or what I say personally as if it's a personal attack. I'm not personally attacking anyone. I'm actually poking and prodding the structure, the institution, so that when I'm no longer here and when I'm no longer doing this work, that the people who come behind and who pick up the baton and who do this work actually have a structure that works and not one that started in 1999, which was this figure review board, and then slowly sort of dwindled away for 20-something odd years, right? So that's my whole, that's the lens through which I look at when I speak about civilian oversight, and I make sort of, commentary and proposals about what I think would be this, the strongest, most resilient sort of oversight that we can have in the city. And so that is what I view my role as being.
I share that same desire, and I think that's why I sort of levy these insights and criticisms on the processes that exist today. Not because I think anybody's doing a bad job or anything. I think we just need to be transparent and continue to push toward real accountability. To that end, I want to make sure there've been people who've been waiting very patiently here who want to testify. I want to bring back one ask that came from the September 15th meeting, and that was request number 7 here. And in that request, we asked for a unified data set encompassing all misconduct complaints against sworn officers from all sources, investigated by BPD and adjudicated by BPD or the ACC, including the outcomes. When we requested this, we didn't quite get that. The response just says that folks are working on it. And I think a lot of the questions that we've touched on today could have probably been answered if we had a data set of that sort. I think it does mean, and you've alluded to it, some of the, calendar year versus fiscal year, those questions have to be resolved in order for it to be useful and actionable. But I think the questions that we've asked today, the things we've talked about today, it's really hard for us to say that this is working if we don't have that information at our fingertips. I think you guys are working really hard on this, but I always want to make sure that we're doing better. And so until we have that, it's really hard to say definitively that, we're at a point where we can scream success. So with that, I'm going to open up the floor to testimony. I've got one person signed up to testify today. I've got Stooks Xavier. Once again, I've got Stooks Xavier. All right. If anyone else wishes to testify, you are welcome to walk up to the podium and state your name. Awesome. I will close public testimony. Once again, I appreciate how much progress we've made on this. Always striving toward perfection, knowing that we'll never get there. I think there are some deep questions we have to ask about the structure that I think, I'm more than willing to have those conversations with everybody in this room. I think we all want to make sure that there are never questions. Now, is that possible? No, but I'm always working toward a scenario by which there are never questions about the work that our police department does and the accountability that then comes from instances in which they overstep. So thank you all, and this hearing is in recess.